Are you ready for Simpsons versus Family Guy? Well, it's not happening again this week.
Wah, wah, wah.
Are you ready for some football, though? Because we are. Welcome, after a 1 week hiatus, to another episode of Convince Me. I am Andy Rutherford, joined as always by Mr. Brian Bennett, not joined as typical tonight by Mr. Casey Elrod, who is under the weather. Bennett, tonight we're a 2 live crew. You ready to do this?
I'm ready.
Yeah,
We pulled an episode out of nowhere.
Yeah, this is going to be different. This is going to be completely off format, and I'll just give you guys a peek behind the curtain. Last week we went to record the episode we promoted of Simpsons versus Family Guy, and my computer wonked out. The battery wonked out. I had to buy a complete new battery for my computer. We could not get the show up in time. I'm hoping you guys saw or heard my apology video. Great. We'll put it off a week. Maybe missing 1 week won't be that bad. This morning, we were getting ready to do Simpsons versus Family Guy, Bennett versus Elrod again. And Mr. Elrod informs us he is under the weather. Talking is something he can't do extremely well right now. And he can't do the show. Therefore, we were in a pickle, but we did not want to go 2 weeks without giving you guys a show. With it being Labor Day, we didn't have to work, or I don't know. Bennett, did you work today?
No work.
No work today, but I, as I'm sure Bennett did as well, had some family things going on, some get-togethers, but we were able to come together and throw something together for you guys. Before we get into what tonight's show is and the change in the format, I do want to say you can keep up with all our happenings on all of our socials. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/ConvinceMeShow. A preview of every episode will be up there on Tuesday nights at 6 o'clock before the podcast drops on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts every Wednesday. Of course, the YouTube link's tinyurl.com/ConvinceMeShow. You can also find us on Instagram, Convince Me Show, and you can find us over at Twitter at Convince Me Show, where sometimes you guys will have an opportunity to vote on topics for this week's show, or for not this week's show, but vote on topics for the shows. But anyway, like I said, Simpsons versus Family Guy, that episode seems to be snake bit, but we're going to try to do it again next week. Maybe third time will be the charm. Who knows? But I will say these guys have had, by the time that rolls around, like 2.5 weeks to study. It better be our best episode we've ever done by the time it rolls around. Bennett, I believe you've told me you've got quite a bit of studying done on that episode.
I've done quite a bit of studying. I've done quite a bit of research. And by studying and research, I mean, I've watched a whole lot of Simpsons episodes.
There you go.
I can't complain.
There we go. Sometimes this show can be fun. Oh, it can be fun. But it kind of is a game. But anyway, it's a game in the sense of there's typically a winner. Tonight, there won't be a winner crowned between myself and Mr. Bennett. Something we've been talking about between us two for a while are doing Mount Rushmore episodes where we take something, we pick two people pick 4 guys, the other person selects which Mount Rushmore is better. Obviously, we're not even doing that exactly tonight because it's just us two, and we're going to let stats play out in a few months from now to see which one of us wins this episode. But as you all are well aware, this is dropping on podcast form on Wednesday, meaning tomorrow night, Thursday, the NFL season 2020 kicks off with the Houston Texans and the Kansas City Chiefs. A lot of you have hopefully drafted your fantasy teams. You've looked at your rosters. You're getting ready to get back in that groove again. I know the members of this show, myself, Mr. Bennett, and Mr. Elrod, before he got sickly, we all had fantasy drafts in the league we're in together on Saturday. We're pumped and ready to go. Football is about to be back. And tonight, me and Mr. Bennett are going to put on our predictor hats and try to tell you all who are the best guys, whether from a fantasy perspective or just in general. We're talking in general, but a lot of times general translates to fantasy. We're talking about the guys that we predict are going to be the best of 2020 on the offensive side of the ball, and guys to look out for, guys you might not see coming that are going to pop up in 2020 at different positions. Mr. Bennett, are you ready to talk about some football?
I have. I actually cheated a little bit earlier before we went live. I actually looked into the crystal ball. So most of mine are going to be spot on. I mixed them up. I'm going to be wrong on some just so it looks like I didn't cheat, but I did cheat.
I tried to call Miss Cleo earlier, and I texted her, and she left me on red. So I'm kind of going by the seat of my pants here. This will not be our best episode. I guarantee it'll be Bennett's favorite episode, but it won't be our best episode.
It will be better than the Marvel versus DC. I promise.
I could stand up and fart right now, and it will always be better than that. But anyway, Mr. Bennett, I am sharing an online. I couldn't find a coin, so we're doing an online one because that's what we do.
That's a very nice coin.
I'm going to let you call it heads or tails.
All right, now, just to be sure, this isn't going to be like the Super Bowl where Jerome Bettis, what do you say, heads? And then they said tails.
So I vaguely remember.
Oh, gosh. All right, no controversy. I'm going to go with heads.
Bennett's going with heads. The flip is up. It is heads.
It's heads.
So, Mr. Bennett, do you want to go first, or do you want to go second in our first topic of best quarterback of 2020?
You know what? I'll go second on this one. I want to hear what you say. Quarterback.
All right. Well, my prediction, as a great man Paul Heyman is known to say, this is not a prediction. This is a spoiler, hopefully. But the best quarterback of this year, 2020, will play in the first game coming up on Thursday night. That is the $503 million man, the one, the only, Mr. Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes, who is only going to be, it's his fourth year in the league coming up, only his third year as a starter. But in those first 2 years as a starter, his first one, he won the league MVP. Last year, he didn't win MVP, but he won a Super Bowl, which I'm very upset about. But he did win a Super Bowl, and then he went into this offseason, and the man got paid. If you'll remember last year, he was hobbled by injuries, still went out, and was one of the more probably the second most dominant quarterback in the league last year when he wasn't 100%. He is 100% now. If you look at his first 2 years in the league, as far as being a starting quarterback, in 31 regular season starts, he has the highest quarterback rating at 108.9. He has the most passing yards in that stretch with over 9,400. The most touchdowns in that stretch was 76. He's also third in completion, fourth in completion percentage, fifth in wins, and seventh fewest interceptions. Did I mention he just made $503 million in the offseason and is set for the next 10 years? Weapons all around him with Tyreek Hill, with Travis Kelce, with Sammy Watkins when he shows up, McCole Hardman on the big plays. He's got a new toy that basically he himself drafted in Clyde Edwards-Helaire to throw out of the backfield. This Kansas City Chiefs offense is going to be stiff, as they always are. And at the helm, Mr. Mahomes, I believe, will get his second MVP in this upcoming year. And will probably not only be the best quarterback in football, he'll probably be the best player in football. Best quarterback of 2020 by my book is Patrick Mahomes.
I'm going to take a little bit of a different stance. when I say the name, it's going to sound like a stretch, but you got to hear me out on this one. You people are going to think I'm crazy right off the bat. But my guy for 2020 to have the best statistical season at the quarterback position is going to be Mr. Matthew Stafford. Now, let's look at his year last year. 2,499 yards. So we'll say right at 2,500 yards, which is decent, but it's not good by his standards. 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Okay, that's not terrible, but let's look at that. He only played half a season. The man was on pace for 5,000 yards. That would have put him right under 40 touchdowns and around 10 interceptions. So people don't realize that he was putting together a career year last year. He hit 5,000 yards once before in 2011. And I think one of the main reasons why that he is going to bounce back this year, if he stays healthy. I know Stafford's always had injury concerns before, but last year they got a new offensive coordinator, Darrell Bevell. And Mr. Bevell likes to throw the ball down the field. He likes to stretch the ball down the field. And Stafford, that's kind of like Stafford's game right there. The coordinator that they had before, he would throw his deep passes, but it was mostly more small and intermediate passes. So with Darrell Bevell, they're going to air it out. He's got the arm to do it. He's got the weapons to do it. I think he should be able to put up a career year this year. He was going to do it last year, got hurt. It's okay. He's got some really good weapons. He's got Kenny Golladay, who's one of the game's best receivers. He's got Marvin Jones, who's a very underrated guy. T.J. Hawkinson, who could have a career year at tight end. And they've got a slew of running backs that'll carry the load, Swift and Kerryon Johnson. I think, did they not just get Adrian Peterson too?
They did.
So I think between those three guys, they should have to respect the running game too. So that should at least help Stafford to spread the ball around the field. I say that they improve and they build off of last season, and I could see him going for safely 5,000 yards, 37 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. And that will lead all quarterbacks in those categories.
Well, I, for one, don't think you're crazy. I think Matthew Stafford, barring injury, will have a fantastic year. He won't have Patrick Mahomes' year, but he'll have a good year. I do think it's interesting that neither one of us said the reigning MVP, Lamar Jackson.
I've seen what the Titans did to him in the playoffs.
That was kind
really
of
good. I think he's really good. I think he's still going to get his, rushing and throwing. We see how these quarterbacks hold up whenever they decide to run the ball in the NFL. Even he's not even nowhere near the size of like a Michael Vick, and even Michael Vick couldn't keep it up forever. So he's going to have to improve his passing at some point. So we'll see. He could prove us wrong. He may be the greatest thing ever, but it's too early to tell right now to give Lamar that distinction as the best quarterback for 2020. Good for fantasy.
Oh, very good for fantasy. So, all right. So moving along, Bennett, let's move before we jump off the Facebook preview. Let's move. Stay in the backfield, slide back to the running back position. Who do you have as your best running back for the year 2020?
Again, I've got another bold prediction at running back too. I'm going with Mr. Derrick the King Henry for 2020. And here's why. What a lot of people don't realize too with Derrick Henry is he led the league last year in rushing attempts with 303. He led the league in yards last year with 1,540. and he tied for first with touchdowns last year with 16. And it was like as the season progressed, he got more and more dominant, especially during the playoffs. That man was insane. He was like like a Madden character out there running over defenses. Whenever Ryan Tannehill took over as the starter, I think he did that versus the Chargers, if I'm not mistaken. That's when the whole Titans organization really started fire on all cylinders, including Derrick Henry. That's when we really started seeing him improving his rushing totals week after week. And they're returning pretty much everybody. And everybody, I think Tannehill does better. I think the receivers do better. Tight ends do better. I think defense does better. Not sure about the line, but we'll see. So I think there's no reason why Derrick Henry shouldn't at least pick up where he left off last year. And one big thing, too, I think that'll help Derrick Henry is they want to get him more involved in the passing game as well, which is something in years past that he hasn't really been known to do a whole lot of. So if they do what they say and get him a little bit more involved in the passing game, he should be able to put up even bigger numbers than last year. And look, Derrick Henry is a beast of a man. I met this man a few years ago, and like his arm was like bigger than my leg. Like no joke. Even standing beside him, I was dwarfed by him. So I know if I'm a defender, I don't want Mr. Derrick Henry running over me. So just let him get his. Everybody be happy. My prediction for Derrick Henry this year will be 290 attempts. So he's going to be a little bit less on his attempts. 1,487 yards and 14 touchdowns, which is still really good. That still puts him like top 3 from last year's numbers. But I see him increasing his receptions to 25 receptions, 260 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So he should finish somewhere in the range of like 1,750 total scrimmage yards and somewhere around 17 touchdowns for Mr. Derrick Henry.
Interesting. I'm going to be honest. I had 2 guys listed here that I could potentially go with, and I wasn't sure which one to go with. I was hoping Mr. Bennett would pick one of them and therefore make my decision easier. He did not. He went with Derrick Henry. So I went and looked a little bit while you were still talking, Bennett, to make my choice between the 2. And I'll tell you who the 2 were. One was Ezekiel Elliott, who may be one of the more consistent running backs in the league. But looking at it, that's not who I'm going with for my pick of best running back of 2020. My pick for best running back of 2020 will be the number 1 pick from a few years ago, Mr. Saquon Barkley. Oh, he wasn't the number 1 pick. He was the number 1 pick in fantasy. Saquon Barkley had an incredible rookie year. Last year, he got hurt. He was out a few games. And even missing 3 games last year, only playing 13 games, he still racked up nearly 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns and playing only 13 games. And when we look at really his last 3 games of last season, I think this guy showed that he is the most technically gifted running back in the league. If you look at his last 3 games of last year, he had 112, 189, and 92 yards. He scored at least a touchdown in all 3 of those final 3 games. And a matter of fact, in a game against the Washington, formerly known as Redskins, now football team, in week 16 of last year, he had 22 carries for 189 yards and a touchdown. He also had 4 receptions for 90 yards and a touchdown in that game. As far as pure skill, he's the most talented running back in the league. You've got Daniel Jones at quarterback, who's no longer going to be a rookie quarterback. We saw him progress as the season went on last year. Got a new offensive coordinator in there. coming from his head coaching job in Dallas, now the offensive coordinator for the Giants. I think they're a team that's only going to get better. There's a lot of the same people there, but I expect Daniel Jones to improve. I expect as Daniel Jones improves, the pass game improves. They've got a decent receiver core there in New York, and when the pass game opens up, that opens up even more running lanes. I think Saquon Barkley has probably the biggest year of his career to date, provided he can stay healthy. But I think a healthy Saquon Barkley is the best running back in football, and I think he'll be the best running back in the year 2020. Again, Bennett, I find it interesting. Neither one of us mentioned last year's probably fantasy football MVP, which is Christian McCaffrey.
It is very interesting. I was thinking the exact same thing.
I think Christian McCaffrey, as far as purely a pass-catching running back, is the best in the league. But he does have a quarterback upgrade this year, getting Teddy Bridgewater, but I don't see much else on that Carolina offense. Unproven head coach in there. It's just hard for me to pick him doing what he did last year all over again.
It's hard to repeat when you have a career year, as we've seen time and time again.
Time and time again, which is actually a perfect transition into our next category of wide receiver. But if you're watching this on Facebook, you're going to have to check out the podcast. Tomorrow morning it drops wherever you get your podcasts, and it drops on YouTube. Guys, if you're listening on the podcast, watching on YouTube right now, we will be right back after this. Those on Facebook, make sure to come check out the rest of this episode and come back also next week where hopefully Elrod's here and we finally get to that much anticipated Simpsons versus Family Guy episode. But guys, be back next week. If you're on the podcast right now, we'll be right back right after this. And we are back, and we are moving along into wide receivers. And I guess it would be my turn. And my pick for the best wide receiver of the year 2020 is probably the most consistent wide receiver in the NFL. My pick for best wide receiver of 2020 is Julio Jones of the Atlanta Falcons. He's 31 years old. And at wide receiver, you might think, but there's no sign at all that he has lost a step anywhere. He's the most consistent wide receiver in the league. In each of the last 6 seasons, the lowest he has gotten, he has had at least 1,394 yards in each of the last 6 seasons. The touchdowns have not always been there for him, but the catches are, the yards are. He's one of the most reliable receivers in the game. I believe I saw something the other day. He ranks first in football against man coverage with like a 78 or 79% success rate against man coverage, which is like the best in football. He's incredible. Like I said, touchdowns aren't always there, but interesting fact, it's quarterback Matt Ryan. If you've watched Matt Ryan over the last 5 or 6 years, he seems to be every other year an elite quarterback. And then he has a fantastic year, and then he has a meh year. He has a fantastic year, and he has another meh year. Last year was a meh year. So if we look at that, Matt Ryan should be better in 2020. Calvin Ridley is becoming a stud, which takes some of the focus off of Julio for defenses. I think it opens up Julio's game even more. I think it's safe to say he's going to have at least 1,400 yards. Look for him to flirt with double-digit touchdowns. Best wide receiver of 2020 will be Julio Jones.
It's interesting. I myself had pondered about Mr. Julio Jones, but for me, the best receiver of 2020 is going to be who the best receiver of 2019 was, and that's Michael Thomas. I'll tell you why. His first 4 seasons in the NFL, 92 receptions, 104 receptions, 125 receptions, 149 receptions. So his receptions have went up every single season. His yard totals for these 4 years: 1,337, 1,245, 1,405, and 1,725. So he kind of dipped a little bit that second year, but he bounced back those two. Another interesting fact about Michael Thomas is he scored at least 9 touchdowns in 3 of those 4 seasons and has an 80% catch rate. Now, defenses have tried to stop him. Defensive coordinators have lost sleep. They've put out their hair trying to figure out some way to stop this man from getting the ball, but nothing's worked yet. So for me, I think it should still be business as usual for Michael Thomas and the Saints, as long as here is the big thing that will hinge for Michael Thomas. I'm going out on a limb and saying if everything works as it should and Drew Brees stays healthy, he should be good again this year. Drew Brees loves to throw the ball. We all know that. They're a huge passing team, and his favorite target is Michael Thomas. The past 4 years, he has had 602 targets. That is crazy. So even if there is a little bit of a regression after a career year, which usually there is, Michael Thomas was leaps and bounds better than everybody else last year. That even a little bit of regression should still put him at a position to where he's still the number 1 receiver. So I think this will be Michael Thomas's last hurrah. There's questions about Drew Brees. Is he going to retire? Can he stay healthy? He's not young. He came in the league in 2001, so he's been playing a while. But I think they'll get it done this year, and Michael Thomas should be good for 130 receptions, 1,550 yards, and I'm going to give him his 9 touchdowns again.
Very, very interesting. That's the first time we actually went with the top guy from last year moving into this year. Interestingly enough, both of those guys, NFC South guys, and there's supposedly a new pretty potent offense as well in the NFC South down there in Tampa Bay. So we might see a lot of fireworks from that division this year. Every year it seems like the passing game becomes more and more prominent. This year, especially in that division, we're probably going to see quite a bit of fireworks. And poor Teddy Bridgewater and the Panthers probably won't be in that arms race. But you never know. You never know. But moving on to the 4th face on our Mount Rushmore for the best of 2020, before we get into the guys to look for, we've looked at quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, probably a position that was not that prominent 15, 20 years ago, but is extremely prominent now, especially for multifunctional offenses. It's a position you need a guy you can lean on, and that is the tight end. Bennett, who's your tight end of 2020?
You know, you look at it, and we do see that trend of where the tight ends are becoming way more than just sit at home and block. You know, we're seeing these tight ends that are being more like these overgrown wide receivers pretty much, that occasionally block, but mostly they're going out and catching the ball. It's interesting. But for me, the 2020 best tight end will be Mr. Travis Kelce. And I'll tell you why, because Travis Kelce has proved to be so consistent year after year and to play at such an elite level year after year. Consider this: over his last 4 seasons, he's had 1,125 yards receiving, 1,038, 1,336, 1,229. So all 4 seasons, he goes for over 1,000 yards receiving as a tight end. These would be great numbers for a wide receiver. These numbers right here tie him with a couple of pretty decent tight ends you may have heard of, Tony Gonzalez and Rob Gronkowski, who each reached 1,000 yards receiving 4 times as well. So if Kelsey stays healthy, which he should, he's been pretty durable, he should be able to go over 1,000 yards again this year, and this will put him past them in regards of 1,000 yard seasons. Another good thing that he has working for him is he is in a pretty high-powered offense that does like to throw the ball. He's got a pretty decent guy throwing him the ball in Mr. Patrick Mahomes. And him and Patrick Mahomes have a really good chemistry together. So I see no reason why Travis Kelce should not finish as the number 1 tight end. I've got him with 93 catches, 1,240 yards, and 7 touchdowns.
Interestingly enough, when we look at this stat, me and Bennett kind of joked before we got on, there's really only 2 possible answers to this question. Granted, somebody, a Darren Waller or somebody, Mark Andrews, could have a huge year and surpass Kelce and my guy for this. It could happen, but in reality, there are 2 tier 1 tight ends in the NFL. And one of them is Travis Kelce. And that's Bennett's pick. That's a fantastic pick. My pick for top tight end of 2020 is Hey Diddle Diddle, Kittle over the middle. The most flamboyant guy in the National Football League, number 85, the nature boy of the NFL, George Kittle. George Kittle in 2018, in his second year in the league, set the record for most receiving yards for a tight end with 1,377. Everybody thought flash in the pan. That's just a really good year. Last year he comes back. Everybody expects a regression. He only played in 14 games last year and still eclipsed the 1,000-yard mark with 1,053 yards and had a 80% catch percentage. He had 5 touchdowns. He was on a team that went to the Super Bowl last year. This is a 49ers team that loves to run the ball, and they've got a more than serviceable quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo, but they've not had any consistent receivers since this coaching staff has been in town as far as wide receivers. By and far, the top target on that team is George Kittle. That will remain the same this year, again, barring injury. I predict another 1,000-yard season. I predict another 5, 6, 7 touchdowns. The guy even got 5 rushing attempts last year. He's a huge part of this offense. He just got paid in this offseason. He's one of the best tight ends in football. And what's the crazy thing is there's him and Travis Kelce as far as receiving tight ends in football. George Kittle doesn't even like running routes and catching passes as much as he likes getting out front and being a lead blocker. He's insane. He's not of a mindset of anybody else. He's not mortal. Oh, and get this. One thing he does have on Travis Kelce, he's only 26 years old. This kid is just now coming into his prime. The answer here may very well be Travis Kelce, but if it's not Travis Kelce, it's going to be George Kittle. So there we go. That
should be 1A and 1B probably for this year.
Oh, absolutely.
But who knows?
You never know, but barring injury, I think definitely. But there we go. Our best of 2020, Bennett's Mount Rushmore, Matthew Stafford, Derrick Henry, Michael Thomas, and Travis Kelce. My guys of 2020, Patrick Mahomes, Saquon Barkley, Julio Jones, and George Kittle. Who's going to win this matchup? We'll find out in 17 weeks. Hopefully
Exactly.
by then we will have shot the Simpsons and Family Guy episode.
We'll see.
I really hope and pray we get that one done next week. But anyway, moving on, we've looked at who we think are going to be the best guys of 2020. But let's look, every year we have guys that seem to kind of maybe not necessarily come out of nowhere, but have their breakthrough. They have a big year that maybe you weren't expecting. This next set of Mount Rushmores that we're going to compare here is going to be our 2020 guys to look for. Either sleeper guys to come out of nowhere, guys that you know and love to maybe take that next step to the next tier, whatever it may be. These are going to be our guys to look for in 2020. And let's go back to the coin flip, Bennett, to kind of reset this. I hope I've still got it pulled up. I do. You want to call it again?
Oh, you go ahead.
All right, I'm going to call tails. And it is tails.
Hey.
And I'm going to go first again because I know, at least on quarterbacks, I'm pretty sure we have the same thought processes here. But I'm going to go first, and I'm going to go with my 2020 guy to look for at the quarterback position. I'm going to go with Kyler Murray. And strangely enough, I had him as my backup if Bennett were to pick pick first and pick Patrick Mahomes on our best of 2020, because I think Kyler Murray is going to be in that conversation this year. He was just a rookie last year, kind of got lost in the shuffle with all the things Lamar Jackson was doing and the things that Mahomes was doing, and he was stuck in Arizona where they didn't have the greatest of years. But last year, from a fantasy football perspective, which doesn't always translate, but from a fantasy football perspective, Kyler Murray was the fifth best quarterback in football. From a NFL perspective, he is only the second rookie quarterback in history to have 3,700 passing yards, 20 passing touchdowns, and 500 rushing yards. The second person only behind Cam Newton to put up those kind of numbers in his rookie year. You look at, he was playing for a rookie head coach last year. Now the rookie head coach and the rookie quarterback are both their second year in the league. Their feet are a little more wet. They know what they're doing a little bit more. This offense gets established a little bit more. They just added DeAndre Hopkins for a Netflix subscription and a pack of chewing gum. Basically nothing. They get DeAndre Hopkins. Kenyon Drake, who was fantastic the back half of the year, is now there full-time, full on board. And if he were to go down, you've got Chase Edmonds, who was pretty incredible last year when he had to step up. Larry Fitzgerald's still there, and up-and-coming Christian Kirk is still there. This is going to be a potent offense. They're going to put up a lot of points, a lot of yards, and at the helm of that offense is a guy that's going to go from pretty dang good to that next level. My guy to watch for in 2020 at quarterback is Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. Bennett?
My guy is a guy I think has been extremely underrated for whatever reason, and that is Mr. Josh Allen. Josh Allen will enter his third year in the pros, and interesting thing about him is he has dramatically improved in almost every single category from 2018 to 2019. And I see him improving again from 2019 to 2020. 2018, 320 attempts with a 52.8 completion percentage. He had just a little bit over 2,000 yards passing, 10 touchdowns. He rushed for 631 yards. I didn't realize that he rushed for that many yards as a rookie, and added 8 rushing touchdowns. Last year, his passing attempts went way up to 461, and he was able to bump up his completion percentage to 58.8. He passed for a little bit over 3,000 yards. His passing touchdowns went from 10 touchdowns to 20 touchdowns. His rushing numbers stayed about the same. It went down a little bit, down to 510 yards, but it was good to see him focusing a little bit more on the passing aspect. So I really don't want, if it's me, I don't want my franchise quarterback out there running around like a madman too much. But he did have 9 rushing touchdowns, which shows that when they get close to the red zone, he is a huge threat to just take it and score it himself. There's a couple of things working in his favor that I think will help him have a huge 2020 year. They added a weapon in Stephon Diggs, which I think will definitely help him out. He's entering his 3rd year. He's only 24 years old, and there is no Tom Brady in his division now. He doesn't have to be in that Tom Brady shadow, and a lot of people are hyping up Buffalo to finally take that step and finally pass the Patriots. So that could be something that could kind of give him a little bit more of an extra boost, not having to be in that shadow anymore. If you look at what he's done now, and if he continues this trend of improving, which I think he should, I don't see why he doesn't have 500 passing attempts with a 60% completion percentage, 3,300 passing yards, 24 touchdowns. I think he's still going to rush for about 600 yards and have 8 rushing touchdowns. If he does this, this is going to put him up there among the top 10 in quarterbacks for a guy that not a whole lot of people are talking about. And if he just goes absolutely crazy and even has higher numbers than this, there's an argument to be made that he could even finish as high as like top 7, top 5 quarterback if all the cards fall the way that they should. So there should be a big year for Josh Allen.
I can't dispute that. He was my alternate on my list should you pick Kyler Murray. So again, we're very much on the same wavelength there. Moving on to running back, Bennett, who's your 2020 running back to look for?
My 2020 running back is a guy that I was extremely upset that I couldn't get on my fantasy team. I think this guy is going to have a monster year, and that is Josh Jacobs. 2nd year running back from Alabama. Think about some of the running backs that Alabama's had over the years. Sean Alexander, Derrick Henry, and Mark Ingram. Some of these other guys like Trent Richardson we won't talk about. That's okay. But he comes from a school that knows how to run the ball. Last year, his rookie season, which usually – well, actually, we've seen rookies now kind of come out of nowhere, but usually it kind of takes them a year or two to kind of get settled in. He had 242 carries for 1,150 yards and 7 touchdowns. He added 20 catches for another 166 yards. And he did this. He has these stats, and he missed 3 games. So think about the numbers that he could have had he not missed the 3 games. The Raiders have pretty much handed him the keys to the backfield. DeAndre Washington's no longer there. There's nobody to really steal carries from him. He's poised to have a huge, heavy workload, and he has that running style and he has that frame that he should be able to easily handle that big workload that he's about to get. I absolutely love Josh Jacobs this year. I think he has all the potential in the world to be a top 5 running back. And this is a guy that you're not hearing a whole lot out of. I could even make the argument that he could push for the most attempts and the most rushing yards this season for a running back. I think a pretty safe number for him this year is going to be right at 300 carries, 1,450 yards, and 11 touchdowns. And then he'll probably add around, I've got 25 catches, around 200 yards, and 1 touchdown. I think that's a very, very safe number for Mr. Josh Jacobs this year.
Very, very interesting. And I would agree with that Josh Jacobs is a guy, or at least I hope so. I drafted him in our fantasy league. I hope he does explode. A guy I'm going with, and I had 2 guys on my list here and was going with one of them. But as you were talking, I decided to go with my alternate. Strangely enough, just doing a last look over here. So I will say honorable mention that I was going to go with was Chris Carson out of Seattle. I do expect him. He's been consistent as anybody could be. His target share has gone up in the receiving game. His rushing over the last 2 years has been phenomenal if he can hang on to the football. But the reason the hanging on to the football thing, as I was looking back over it, it's what made me switch to my other guy. Something about Josh Jacobs last year, he was a guy that was a rookie last year. No, I don't think a lot of people expected a whole lot out of. My guy to look for in 2020 is somebody in a very similar situation. My 2020 guy to look for is Antonio Gibson in Washington. A rookie coming out of Memphis. They drafted him in the 3rd round, pretty high draft capital on this guy. He's a guy that is an athletic freak. He went to Memphis, didn't play a lot at Memphis, which some people would say, well, why does that make him so good? He didn't get to go. He was a transfer from junior college coming into Memphis. He had some grade issues coming out of high school. Then when he got to Memphis, he's playing behind future NFL players. So he didn't get a lot of playing time at Memphis, but this guy is a physical freak. He's an athletic specimen. And coach of the Washington football team, that's so weird to say.
Washington
It really is. But Ron Rivera has come out and said, of course, Ron Rivera had coached in Carolina for the last several years, that Antonio Gibson's skill set is on par, if not better, than Christian McCaffrey's, which Ron Rivera, if anybody would know, would know. And then you look at other guys that were in that Washington backfield coming out of last season into this season. Darius Geis, gone. Adrian Peterson, gone. Chris Thompson, who'd been there for the last few years, catching balls out of the backfield, gone to Jacksonville now. Antonio Gibson is going to get an opportunity. He's going to be used in the passing game. He's going to get the touches. More than likely, he's going to be their top guy. And as far as every year we get rookie running backs that seem to come out of nowhere, my 2020 guy to watch for at running back is going to be Antonio Gibson in Washington. So
you're absolutely correct with that. He's going to have every single opportunity to just run wild back there in Washington.
Yeah,
for the Washington football team,
formerly known as the Redskins. Moving on to wide receiver. I feel like I looked at a second-year guy at quarterback in Kyler Murray. Bennett looked at a second-year guy at running back in Josh Jacobs. I'm going to look at a second-year guy at wide receiver as a guy to watch for this year, and that is Marquise Hollywood Brown in Baltimore.
Hollywood.
Hollywood Brown came out with a lot of really hype last year coming into his rookie season. He was the first receiver off the board in that draft. And as far as that goes, he was a little bit of a disappointment, but he was banged up a vast majority with an ankle issue all last year. As a matter of fact, only 4 games last year was he on the field for more than 70% of snaps. So we didn't see Hollywood Brown healthy and at his best last year. This year, all indications are he's 100%. He's healthy. He's good to go. He's going to be the number 1 receiver in a very potent, high-scoring offense. Now, granted, they're a run-heavy offense with Lamar Jackson and Mark Ingram. But Bennett talked earlier, Lamar Jackson needs to to perfect his passing ability. If Lamar Jackson finds his way into becoming more of a passer and becoming a better passer, his number one wide receiver target with an ungodly amount of speed coming out of Oklahoma is Marquise Hollywood Brown. So I'm kind of banking on Lamar Jackson a little bit with this pick, but I do think there will be vast improvement over last year, and I think Hollywood Brown is the receiver to watch for in 2020.
Interesting. I'm going to continue the trend here. I have a second year wide receiver. This is funny. And we might as well just name this best second year players.
There we
to look
go.
out for. The guy I'm going to go with is DJ Metcalf out of Seattle. He's 6'3", 228 pounds. Like I say, he's a second year receiver. And this guy is a very big physical specimen, and he's a huge end zone threat. And when I look at him, he reminds me of like a Des Bryant type figure, somebody who is, like I said, a huge end zone threat. Last year, he had 58 receptions, 900 yards, and 7 touchdowns. That averages him out to 15.5 yards per catch as a rookie playing for Seattle. And we know that Seattle is also more of a run-heavy type team. They've got a great quarterback in Russell Wilson. But to see him put up nearly 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns, that puts him kind of up there in some of the more known guys that we talk about who finished with around 1,000 yards and 7 or 8 touchdowns. He's averaging about 6 targets a game, which is pretty surprising for, like I said, for Seattle. But he has shown that he does have the potential to go absolutely bonkers on any given week. Look at the wild card game last year against Philadelphia. He had 7 catches for 160 yards and a touchdown. If he's able to do something even remotely that once or twice a year, you're going to have some huge numbers from him. I think he should only get better this year. He has that year under his belt. Shouldn't be any sophomore slump, I don't think. He'll have plenty of opportunities in the end zone because Seattle can move the ball, that's for sure. I think he goes for 65 catches, 987 yards, and 9 touchdowns again.
Very, very good pick. Interestingly enough, my alternate choice on wide receiver was not DK Metcalf, but his teammate, Tyler Lockett. So
that's another good one.
That is another good one. So Bennett, moving into the our last category here, tight end. Who's going to be? Seems like every year we have one that comes out of nowhere and is at the top of the league. Last year, it was Darren Waller. Who's it going to be this year?
My game plan is to talk this guy up so that he does really good because he is my fantasy tight end, and that's Noah Fant. For Noah Fant, I'm really excited to see what he can do this year. This is funny. I'm pretty sure he's a second-year player also.
He is.
I'm pretty sure. That's funny. He's got a few things in his favor that should help him out. He's got Drew Lock at quarterback, who Drew Lock has tons and tons of potential himself. And Drew Lock's also been kind of a breakout candidate as well. So if Drew Lock breaks out, I think Noah Fant will be a beneficiary of that. They've got a new offensive coordinator in Pat Shurmur. And the reason why this is very important because this coordinator, he sees Noah Fant as like a chess piece. And you're going to see Noah Fant, he's going to line up on the line. He's going to block. Then you might see him line up as a wide receiver. You're going to see him line up in the slot. He's going to be kind of like that X factor for Denver this year. Denver's got a lot of hype on him this year. You got a lot of hype on the quarterback. I see a lot of hype on this guy. last year he had 40 catches for 562 yards and 3 touchdowns. Not bad as a rookie. I see the arrow pointing up everywhere for him. He's got tons and tons of potential and tons of opportunity there. I think he gets 50 catches, 640 yards, and 5 touchdowns for Noah Fant.
Noah Fant, very good pick. I'm going to break the mold here. I'm not going with a second-year player. I'm going with a third-year player on who to be, which means I'm going to be wrong, judging by the course of this. And I'm going with a guy that may have some people rolling their eyes and think that I've lost my mind, but I'm not. I haven't lost my mind. I'm really high on this guy for 2020. And in the fantasy draft that we just had this past weekend, I was on a Zoom call, much like this, with Mr. Bennett, Mr. Elrod, and Destin, a friend of the show. And right before I made this pick, I said, steal of the draft. And I clicked the button. My guy to watch for at tight end in 2020 is the Miami Dolphins' Mike Gesicki. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's the Dolphins. And I on a lot of levels, I agree with that. They've been sort of the laughingstock for the last few years. But Gesicki, in his third year, at the end of last year, really started to break out. And if you look at, again, I see a lot of things in the NFL from a fantasy football perspective. Over the last, from week 9 on, so the back half of the year last year, Mike Gesicki was the 7th best tight end in football. And when you look at his last 5 or 6 games, all 5 of his touchdowns last year came in the last 6 games of the season. Fitzmagic loves him, and Fitzmagic's going to be the starting quarterback down there. I do expect at some point this year for Tua to take over as a starting quarterback. And as we've seen on a lot of different occasions, who is a rookie quarterback's best friend is tight end. There are a handful of guys every year at the tight end position that have the ability and the opportunity to have that breakout year. Last year it was Darren Waller. This year, Noah Fant's a guy with the talent who's going to have the opportunity. Another guy with the talent that's going to have the opportunity is Mike Gesicki. I think they're going to be a more potent passing offense this year. Preston Williams, if he's healthy, is going to be pretty good. Brain fart, top receiver down there. He's on my fantasy team. Devontae Parker. He's another guy we could consider for breakout wide receiver this year. He's going to be solid. And with those guys being even more potent, that's only going to open up the middle more for the tight end. My breakout guy, my guy to look for in 2020 at tight end is going to be Mike Gesicki. So.
Got a lot of hype.
We got a lot of hype. So just to give you guys, again, a rundown, when we go back to the best of 2020, my Mount Rushmore was Patrick Mahomes, Saquon Barkley, Julio Jones, George Kittle. Bennett's was Matthew Stafford, Derrick Henry, Michael Thomas, Travis Kelce. And then when we look at our guys to look for in 2020, Bennett had Josh Allen, Josh Jacobs, DK Metcalf, and Noah Fant. I had Kyler Murray, Antonio Gibson, Hollywood Brown, and Mike Gesicki. Who's going to win? We'll find out in 4 or 5 months from now.
We'll probably be looking back at this and we'll be like, what in the world were we talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe not. I hope not. But
we may look at this and think we skipped on Lamar Jackson. We skipped on McCaffrey. Kyler Murray and Josh Allen were both trash. I mean, it could be – we could look back on this in much embarrassment. We could look back on this and look like geniuses and think maybe we should start an NFL podcast. But
we'll see. This could be the start.
Whether it's good or it's bad, blame Elrod and his immune system. So, All right, well, guys, that's all we have for you this week. Again, this was a thrown together show today, but we could not go 2 weeks without giving you guys something, especially since this week wasn't due to technical difficulties, and it was possible to do it. We had to give you something. We do send out our best wishes to Mr. Elrod. We hope he's on the mend. We hope he's studying up on his Family Guy, because we hope, we pray, next week we're finally going to get to give you that Simpsons versus Family Guy show. But this week we got to talk a little football. We're looking forward to football this weekend. Bennett, before we sign off, any parting words?
Yeah, Elrod, get well soon. Since you're not a part of this show, I can't call this my favorite episode. I'm a little sad. So I promise you guys we'll have Simpsons and Family Guy next week.
Hopefully. And some people would argue, since he's not here, this is their favorite show, but who knows? I mean, the guy decides to run for office and then he gets so sick he can't talk and join us here. Maybe that's a sign, trying kind of a warning to him, but we'll see. But hopefully next week we'll be back. He'll be back. We'll finally get a freaking Simpsons and Family Guy episode. But will we actually pull it off? Tune in next week to see. Bennett, anything else before we go?
I don't think so. I think it's a miracle we got this one out. We do it for you guys, though. We do it for y'all.
We do it for you guys. Enjoy the football this weekend. Remember, it's getting that time of year again. Make sure your fantasy rosters are set.
Get them set.
Nobody likes to lose a game because they forgot to set their roster. Happens to all of us. Don't let it happen to you. Again, check us out on the socials for all updates. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're on YouTube. We're wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Andy Rutherford. This is Brian Bennett. On behalf of the missing and sickly Casey Elrod, we will see you guys next week on Convince Me. Peace.
Bye.